So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. This is a tradition, an annual tradition that we do before the session. Um, um, okay. Um, and so, yeah, it's always a good tradition to have because we used to get together in person, but of course, um, we realize that there's a lot of commitment on everybody's part. And Zoom is one of those things that you get better attendance really if we do it virtually as opposed to in person. But hopefully, I know that the delegation, especially Senator King, would like to have us all back together soon. So maybe after the session, we'll get together in person. I just want to acknowledge and recognize everyone who had a hand in putting this together, especially the club leadership team, Clint Sabrati, Sharon Cranford, Charlie Barkley, as well as the MCDCC team behind the scenes, Andrew Sandri and Roz Mera at the office, who's always great at putting together flyers, Seth Grimes, and anyone else I can't see it here, but they're MCDCC members. Thank you for joining us. And thank you to each and every one of you again for being here. Andrew will be the one to host and help us with the technical piece. Please, everyone, stay muted. If your Zoom shows different name or phone number, we would prefer that you please rename it and put your first and last name so that we know who you are in the Zoom with us. Former Delegate Barkley will be the moderator. Yeah. So with that, Andrew, anything else to add?
No, if everyone could just keep themselves muted unless they are invited to speak, we would appreciate that. And I will be keeping an eye on this behind the scenes to make sure everyone stays muted. But thank you all so much for being here.
Wonderful. Clint, Sharon, anything else? Peter? Are we good to go? Thumbs up? All right, over to you, Charlie.
Okay, thank you, Moomin. And
thank you.
To the team, I want to welcome you and wish you luck in Annapolis. And just remember that we're all back here. We can do anything to help you. Let us know. Senator King, we're going to start with you with an opening statement. Give everybody no more than 5 minutes. Hopefully you can do it less than that. And then we'll take questions after that. Senator King?
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I want to just quickly outline a couple of the bills that I've got going this year, and then we'll be interested to hear what your questions are and hear from. I'm more interested in hearing from you all than I am talking myself. Got several bills going so far. A lot of it has to do with funding for the Empower program at the University of Maryland. I have a truancy bill that I've been working with the state's attorney with John McCarthy on that would help families that are having problems getting their kids to school. It would help with a kind of just a program for families to make their kids see the importance of being in school, and it's we're doing it as a local bill right now. It actually was a bill that was in last year and got voted on in the House on March 20th, and it didn't have a chance to get really heard in the Senate. So we are going with it for now as a local bill to try and get something passed, but would be very happy if it became a statewide bill. We have to do something about the truancy. It's up to it's like 68% in Montgomery County right now, and kids are just not going to school or seeing the importance of it. And so we're hoping that a program to help parents with that issue might help to get kids in school. So that's one of the big ones I'm working on. There are some income tax credits that we're looking at. One of them is the homestead tax credit. For this past year, the county sent out like a postcard that said you had to reapply for the homestead tax credit. Most people, I think, threw it away because I've gotten a lot of phone calls from people that didn't even know that they could reapply. And so this is going to ask the county to give more of a leeway and give people more of a chance so they can apply and get the homestead tax credit. I've got one for the State Library Resource Center funding. The librarians get cheated out of funding about every chance that anybody can cheat them out of something, I think. So we're working on the library funding. Looking to do a grant for the Maryland Soccer Association, Maryland State Youth Soccer. We've found that there are a lot of kids that would love to play soccer, and we find out that the equipment is so expensive that they're not able to participate. So we are trying to put together a fund so that all kids can participate playing soccer. So that's also a big one. There's one about a donation for a designation on tax forms. I don't know if this will go anywhere or not. We've had so many ideas over the year of checkoffs on the on your tax form, but this one would be for organ donation. So we're going to try and see if that one will fly this year. Anyway, that's kind of the beginning. I've got a bunch of bills working, a controversial one probably or two, but it's early, and I'm sure we'll have more bills the first couple of weeks of session, as we always do. So that's my story. Glad everybody's here tonight.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Okay, next I'd like to go to Delegate Acevero. Gabe, are you there?
I am. Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Appreciate it. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. As was mentioned, I'm Delegate Gabe Acevero, and I'm proud to serve as your state delegate in Annapolis, proud resident of Montgomery Village, and it is always good to be here with you all to not just talk about legislation that I'm working on or plan on working on, but really to hear some bill ideas from you all as well. A good bit of the legislation that we work on in Annapolis, they do come from issues that we are interested in and from advocacy groups. But it also comes from constituents, from people like you all that live in our district and who we have everyday conversations with. I'll be very brief so that we have opportunity for questions, because I'm really interested in hearing from some folks, but I will highlight three of my bills. And before I do that, just to remind folks that I'm on the House Appropriations Committee, which oversees our state's capital and operating budget. Also a member of the Legislative Black Caucus, the Legislative Latino Caucus, and the Legislative LGBTQIA+ Caucus, whose responsibility is, of course, to work on bills that advance those respective communities. But also proud to be part of the Montgomery County delegation, where we work on issues and interests to our county as a whole. And so with that, I'll just mention three bills. I'm working on a lot more bills. Some of those bills you do know and have heard of before, but I wanted to mention three that are of importance and are newer bills that folks can keep an eye on. And the first is around language access and ensuring that we have language access as it relates to state agencies, websites, et cetera. Maryland is home to a very huge immigrant community, and that immigrant community is represented, throughout this county through various languages. And we want to ensure that those that live in Montgomery County, those that live in Maryland, those new Americans are able to interact with state agency and state government and to be able to have that information provided or translated into language that they understand and are able to access whatever services that they need. And so the language access bill is a matter of equity in my eyes, because we need to ensure that these services, these resources that we have available to our entire community and to the public, that folks are able to access it. And language shouldn't be a barrier to accessing the kind of services and resources that one needs. So we're working on a bill with a number of other groups around that, and really excited about what could come from it. The second is around universal basic income, or UBI, for transition age youth, or youth aging out of our foster care system here in the state of Maryland. We want to make sure that between the ages of 18 and 21, that youth, foster care youth that are aging out of our foster system, have the financial support that they need, so that they're able to make ends meet, they're able to thrive, they're able to provide for themselves. And the bill for UBI for transition age youth would accomplish that by ensuring that once they turn 18 until they turn 21, that they have that direct cash assistance. And then the third is an issue related to both civil rights, but also criminal justice reform, and that is inmate phone calls. There are a number of states where, Maryland included, where if you are attempting to communicate with a loved one or a family member behind prison or jail walls, there's a lot of fees, a lot of really charges that either you or your family member will have to pay or incur in order to speak with you. And we know that communication is a very important thing for particularly those who are reentering our society, those who are trying to serve their time. That communication with family and loved ones outside is very, very important. And so we'll be putting in a bill that would ensure that inmate phone calls are not just free, but we're not seeing the kind of exploitative practice that we've seen over the years, where private companies, telecommunication companies, whether it's overcharging families or charging inmates, that really not just puts a financial burden, but that extra stress of communicating with that family or that loved one that's behind, whether it's a jail or prison. And so we don't want to do that. We want to ensure that if folks have to communicate with loved ones, that they're able to do so and they're not being exploited as a result. Outside of that, I have a good bit of other bills. Really excited to talk to you all about it. Good to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. And I'll pass it back to you, Charles.
Okay, thanks, Gabe. Okay, next I'm going to go to Delegate Lesley Lopez. Lesley, you there?
Yes, I am. Oh, yes, I am, Charlie. Thanks so much for moderating, and it's great to see everybody here on Zoom this evening. So my name is Delegate Lesley Lopez. I live in Clarksburg, and technically Germantown, but really Clarksburg Town Center. And I am serving on health and government operations. And as I'm looking at my list of bills, I don't want to say I'll be brief, because anytime a politician says I'll be brief, you know that you're really in for it. So I will say that I will try to be comprehensive but efficient in going over these bills that I've been working on. Some of them are reintroductions, kind of like greatest hits that got really close to the finish line last year, but just couldn't make it through the Senate. Not pointing fingers, but that's usually where they didn't quite make it through. And then some of them are new ideas. This year, I have told myself, the front part of my brain to say no to things, keep it streamlined. I think most folks know here that I am also running for the 6th Congressional District. And so I should streamline things. But I'm really not. I'm keeping the same course load of bills that I would normally keep in any session. So let's see. So to start things off, in terms of bills that I'm reintroducing, one that will go through the HGO is called the Childhood Immunization at Pharmacies Act. And basically what that does is it preserves something that we found out during COVID, which was that it's really efficient to get basic childhood immunizations in pharmacies. 93% of us live within a few miles of a pharmacy. If you are a parent who has a job and you're trying to get an appointment with a pediatrician, that can be really difficult. In places like Garrett County, in the very western mountain part of our state, there's only one licensed pediatrician's office in all of the county. And so it becomes very, very difficult to get appointments. We found out this is something that's working, and so we just need to iron out some of the details with the pediatricians to make sure we're not jeopardizing anyone's health. But that's came very close to passing last year. A new bill that I'm working on is about hospital finance assistance. Some of you might know this, but every hospital in Maryland is technically a nonprofit. And in order to get that tax status, they have to offer free and reduced care to certain low-income people, right? The problem is that we're finding there's some really tricky categories around geography and assets that are excluding a lot of folks who simply can't pay for their health care, and that's compounding a lot of other healthcare crises that we have in this state. We have a very unfortunate distinction of having the longest hospital wait times of any state. We are 50 out of 50, and that is miserable. And part of it's because people just aren't getting routine care. And so to give you a specific example, one thing that we're noticing is that people might have, it might be very low income, but they might inherit a house that looks like it's very high value. And so they might on paper look like they're very wealthy, but in actuality, there's not a whole lot of liquid assets that they could use to spend for healthcare. Another thing is geography. You can get free or reduced healthcare in where you live, but if you work outside that area, and say you're a pregnant woman who goes into labor, like let's say you work in Montgomery or live in Montgomery County, but you work in Frederick, you're outside of your area. And so it would be free if you had your baby here, but because you were, a couple counties over, you'd have to pay an exorbitant amount of money. Another new one that I'm working on is called Eric's ID Law. This is one that some of you might be familiar with. It's to allow people who have autism to get a certification, a designation, I should say, on their ID. So that way, if they're having, issues communicating with law enforcement or other folks they might interact with, they have a way of, showing some self-identification and to hopefully ease problems that come from there. It's been spearheaded by a young man named Eric Grantham. And some of you might be familiar with him because he's been doing a lot of work with his mother in the county. Chair Will Smith of Judicial Proceedings is my partner on that one. I'm also picking up on a bill that was, as an idea, it came about from a work group in Congress that Congressman Trone was a part of. It's about opioids and fentanyl. Certainly, we have significant issues with substance abuse and substance use with young folks, particularly in our county and across the state. And what this bill does is it allows for anonymous testing. So if you are, let's say, a lower level drug dealer and you want to test drugs that you procure before you go out and sell them, you can do that. If you're someone who's recently purchased drugs and you would like to test to make sure that you're not taking anything that will kill you, you can do that, and it's anonymous. There's no cost associated with. And we're seeing, all sorts of case studies about how helpful this is for harm reduction. So I'm excited to champion it in the state. Something that I've worked on a lot over the years is the burdens of student loan debt. People know what they're going to take out when they take out a loan, but interest can be really complicated and confusing and be variable. And there's also all sorts of predatory systems for people who are, financially compromised that, things that we can do in the state to eliminate that. So one thing that I'm really proud to continue championing is on the awareness around the public service loan forgiveness program. I want to make it easier for state employees to access those money that they are totally eligible for. We just have to create awareness and help the process to go a little bit quicker and how it's administrative. Some of you might remember that we had, I think, like 10,000 openings for state employees at the beginning of last year. And so this is an incentive to help, actually hire all the people that we're supposed to be hiring at the state. Another bill within the student loan space is just requiring higher ed institutions to report very basic info about the debt that people graduate with. One of the hardest things about this problem is that we just don't know the average amount of debt that someone graduates with. We don't know the average default rate. We don't know what the average interest rate is. Like, none of that information is required to be reported. So we just don't know. Switching gears a little bit and talking about stuff that will go through Judiciary Committee. I'm working on a bill that will create basically a bubble zone outside of reproductive care clinics. What we're seeing is that last year, after all these great bills that were passed to help people coming from other states get reproductive care here in Maryland, that we've had new clinics open up. And sometimes you gotta open up a clinic wherever there might be space, and it might not be conducive to having, a designated spot for people to express their First Amendment right and other folks coming in to get their constitutionally protected care. And so we just need to make sure that we've defined it. Some of you might know that there is a reproductive care clinic that just opened up in Allegheny County. And they basically uprooted a whole clinic from West Virginia, the whole staff, the programs, everything. And there's also one in Hagerstown that's dealing with a similar issue as well. Also working on some AI deep fake bills. I continue to work on this issue because it's just growing in importance. A lot of times people don't even know they've been impacted by it. Other things to mention.
Lesley, I'm going to ask you to kind of wrap it up. If you
Oh,
would.
sorry. I can't. I just start talking and I don't even know how long I'm taking. So I'm sorry.
It's been a while. So.
It's been a while. Okay, goodness. All right. The last thing I'll say is that I am the chair of the Metro Washington Area Committee, which means I get all sorts of local bills that have to do with essentially like overview of the Park and Planning Commission. It's been a tricky kind of space. But ultimately we reached a compromise where we put together a work group of people who had to do with the development review process and streamline things. I'll admit that it got a lot of negative press to begin with because it was a very new idea and people took a bit to kind of marinate with it. But ultimately we have 22 recommendations that will streamline the development review process, which means a quicker pathway for affordable housing. It means just a faster process all the way around. And so with that, Charlie, I will shut up so everyone else can talk.
Okay, thank you, Lesley. Okay, last I'll go to Delegate Greg Wims. Greg, this is your first session, so tell us what you wanted to do.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, Charlie, for hosting it, and the residents of D39. As all of you just heard, I am the new delegate representing 39, and what I've been doing is traveling around the state, meeting primarily with the members of my committee. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee, but I'm also on the Veterans Affairs Caucus. So I wanted everyone to know that those are some of the key areas I want to focus on. And the reason I've been traveling around, because when I come up with some bills that I think that may help us at 39, but also help the residents in the state, of course, you need to have co-sponsors and people to vote for it. And so with that, my main focus, or main two focuses, actually will be with housing, but as relates to seniors. And as we talk about not only just regular seniors like myself, I'm a senior, but also low-income seniors. Because as I've traveled the state, and especially in our district, I've noticed that there are more and more seniors who actually have been displaced from their rental units because of the high interest rate. And as all of you know, most seniors are on fixed income. So that's the first thing. But in the last 3 days, I've been working with our attorney, our Montgomery County attorney, and with the Montgomery County Police Department on a bill that I hope to put in the next couple of days before the deadline. And we call it the Reckless and Aggressive Driving Bill. And this came from when Sergeant Pat Key was injured on 270. All of us know, because we live in the area, he lost both of his legs, and he's recuperating now, I believe, at the Veterans Hospital down in Bethesda, Walter Reed. But what we found is that the person who committed that crime had several aggressive driving tickets before this happened. So I'm working to put together legislation that those who repeat offenders will, in fact, will have to pay a fine, and we'll also have the possibility of some jail time. So again, I'm working on it, but I think I'm going to have it pretty much cleared before the session starts. So that might be my first bill that I will put in. And I did want to say in closing, Charlie, that we're working with all of our delegation in 39 on various bills they have, and particularly with Senator King, the truancy one, because I'm on Ways and Means that deals with the schools. That's the one I like to help her with on the outside. And with Delegate Acevero, I'm interested in inmate the bill because with the phones and the cells and so forth, because I've had over the years through my Victims' Rights Foundation, I've heard many complaints about that system. And with my sister, Delegate Lopez, I'm very interested in seeing what we can do to help you make with the hospital bills. I don't know the exact name, but I know there's some, what you said explained seems like something I want to work with. So with that, this will be my first term, but I look forward to, as I say, bringing the bacon back to District 39. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Okay, we're going to go to the questions. We got about 7 questions. I'll skip around a little bit. We'll ask each of you to try to be as short as possible so we can get to them all, hopefully. Okay, the first question. The Comptroller's Office just came out with the State of the Economy report. You may not have been able to read the whole report yet, but you've probably seen the highlights. And Maryland is really experiencing stagnant growth. So I'm looking for you to come up with, if you have any ideas, how we can grow the Maryland's economy. And Lesley, why don't we start with you? And I'm going to ask you to keep it short.
Sure. I won't take that personally, Charlie.
Mhm.
So whenever I read these reports, I just get so, I mean, they're just so negative, and it's a lot to kind of bear. But when I talk to the people who are doing the work, who are, the small business owners, the people who work at the county level and like workforce development, they always seem to have ideas. So it doesn't feel that hopeless because the people who are the practitioners are actually giving you suggestions on things. One of the conversations that I just had this morning was with folks in Allegheny County who were talking about how they're really working to reimagine some of these kind of Rust Belt problems they have, where they have huge industrial buildings that have gone stagnant because, the manufacturing has changed. But now they're starting to realize that there's a lot of what's called the circular economy, like recycling things. And so sometimes there's waste that comes from Montgomery County or Frederick that can be reprocessed in these areas in a green energy sense. And there's lots of more creative ways to invest in kind of like the shell of things that are there. I think one of the big issues that we have is that there's really no affordable housing to bring a workforce here. And then we need to have a workforce that's trained to meet the demands of local businesses. And so I think, there's just a lot of partnerships that need to go on. But those partnerships need to help drive industry, which is what's going to hire people.
Okay, thank you. Greg, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, the one thing, most of you know me as a community activist, but I actually had a small business about 25 years ago, and I was housed in Gaithersburg and for about 8 years. And so when I read the report, skimmed it like everyone else did, I thought immediately we need to come up with some ways that we can bring in small businesses, one, also think of ways, and again, I'm on the Ways and Means Committee, we have taxing, but we might give some tax incentives for these businesses to come in. And then the other part is in our area, 270, as we go up towards Germantown, some of us on this call have visited many of those businesses there, especially as relates to the biotech and the AI that's now coming. See what we can do to bring more of those businesses, not only in 39, but throughout the state, to help bring about more jobs and help create the economy. So that's something that I'll be looking at as I work on my committee to see what we can do to stimulate more growth in Maryland.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Gabe, would you like to comment on the growth issue?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly that despite the comptroller's report, that it's important to note that Maryland is still the richest state in the union per capita. In terms of median income, we are still a county that has the highest concentration of STEM PhDs and any other jurisdiction. And we also have a huge federal and contract workforce, and that is growing. And so I'm pretty optimistic about how Maryland is growing. I think this report is, a bit of a snapshot, but, one that we should look at and recognize that there's still, there are things that we can be proud of, and there's still things that we need to do. I just mentioned some of the things that we can be proud of. Some of the things that I think we need to do, relates to education, and it also relates to our state's tax system. Maryland has a very regressive and archaic tax code. And as Delegate Wims mentioned, it's something that we need to look at over the next few years. And I think Governor Moore and Democrats will certainly do so. But all of these stuff costs money. what we're planning on do for our state. All of that costs money, and it's time that we start looking at our tax system, our tax code.
Okay, thank you. Nancy, would you like to comment?
Sure. One of the things that I hear the most from the business community, especially in our area, is that they can't attract people to come here to work for them because nobody wants to do the traffic on 270. And I understand that all the environmentalists and the county executive really want to get people out of their cars and onto buses and that kind of thing. But I don't believe in our area that it's convenient enough that people are going to want to do it. I think something has to be done with 270. I don't know where the funding is going to come at this point because it's virtually gone. But I think that's one of the issues is for the companies trying to attract new people. It's just not happening. And the other thing too, and it's kind of a natural reflex, but whenever there's a shortage, and county funding is a little on the low side this year, immediately we talk about how we're going to charge the corporate world. How are we going to suck more out of the businesses in order to, to fill that void? And it doesn't help to attract people, I don't think. So we've got to find some other ways to do that.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Okay, our next question, since you're talking
Wait, there's
about
a hand up
budget.
here, Charlie.
Okay. Next question will be, how will the General Assembly fill the gap in the transportation budget to ensure that our transportation priorities don't get postponed indefinitely? Gabe, you're on appropriations. I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if I remember correctly, this is what the so-called rain tax, was about. I think, I'll just speak as a Democrat that we really need to take this message to Marylanders across the state that this war that Hogan and other Republicans waged on the rain tax was really a dishonest fight. And it was dishonest in the sense that, and Charles, you know this because we wanted to ensure that the revenue coming from certain areas were going towards transportation and transportation projects. But when we begin to slash things like, what they call the rain tax and others, these are important mechanisms for funding transportation and transportation projects. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to get back to communicating with Marylanders about the importance of having money set aside for transportation projects, et cetera, and the role of, whether it's taxes or fees, et cetera, in funding that, such as, what Hogan and others call the rain tax was really a source or a fund, resources for ensuring that we could pay for transportation projects. So I think that's where we need to get back to. We just need to be real with Marylanders and talk to them, because I think what we did, and by we, I mean what the legislature did a few years ago, was certainly a good start. I think where we kind of lost our footing is allowing Republicans to then reframe it as the rain tax as sort of this unnecessary tax on Marylanders, when really what it was about ensuring that we have money for transportation and for other infrastructure spending.
Okay, Nancy, you're on B&T. Do you want to talk about transportation budget?
Well, part of the disadvantage that we have right now is that Hogan, when he was here, and when Pete Ron was his transportation guy, they spent all of the transportation money for the next 6 years. And I mean, if you drive up to Western Maryland, there's a road up there. It's off of 68 that goes nowhere. It's a very nice road. Nobody drives on it hardly, and but it went to a Republican district. So that's part of what we're dealing with. But we have to find a way to fund transportation. I mean, the American Legion Bridge, they're waiting for us to kick in our share of that, and we don't even have the money to do that. So I'm not sure where that money is going to come from or how we're going to raise it, but we know we have to do something, and it's going to be one of the issues that we talk about this year.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Lesley, you want to talk about transportation?
Sure, Charlie. So I am the one lone member of this delegation that's not on one of the money committees. And so for me, I usually have to hear from my colleagues in the delegation about what to expect. And then of course we have to wait for the governor's budget to come out when we really see where the priorities are for things. Just to be quick about things, it's really staggering, the cuts, and they touch just about every part of the state. What I've heard is basically rumors of, taxes here, taxes there, but I think it's really premature, and I don't want to muddy the waters and get people nervous about things that might not happen. But certainly transportation is an equity issue. It's a huge barrier to economic growth within our district and within our region. And, there's also like environmental impacts. I think, in addition to 270, increasing the use of the Brunswick line, I think would be great for the region. And it seems like, from everything I've seen, it seems like it's a pretty doable thing. And then, of course, up from us at 15, there was a tanker that caught fire and endangered people's lives. And so there's safety issues additionally. So, we just got to figure out a way to do it.
Okay,
Charlie,
thank you, Greg.
Charlie, can I just add one little thing here?
Go ahead.
I'm on the senior leadership team in the Senate, and we've talked a lot about taxes and what will happen with that. I do not see, unless it's a major emergency, I don't see us raising any taxes this year at all. There is not the appetite there to do it. So we'll see how we work it out. I think there's some other things that can be cut if they need to be, but I don't see us raising taxes this year.
Okay, Greg, you want to respond to the
Yeah, just saying I
transportation?
agree with Senator King on that from what I've learned and talked with folks. And then with Delegate Lopez, I've been working as the Up County Regional Director for the past year. And we're working with the people at MARC Train. I think that if we could somehow the funding or work with the Maryland Department of Transportation, that might be a way to alleviate some of the traffic, because the proposals are to have the MARC go round trip many times, and there was at least a couple of times a day. So the once, and then they have the idea of maybe going into Frederick, etc. So that's one of the things I want to look at, is seeing if we can expand the MARC train lines.
Okay, Greg, I'm going to stay with you, and we're going to talk about the overall budget, because there's a deficit problem there too. So do you have programs you're willing to cut, or do you have taxes you're willing to increase?
Well, the good news is, because I'm new and I have to look at everything, I have to say that that's something going to be when I get there. But I will say, as I said earlier, I would say 99%, because something could happen with that I don't know about, that we don't want to raise any taxes. That I'm pretty much squared away on that. And as far as cutting things, I don't know, because I'm new and I have to look and see what is proposed by my colleagues or even by the governor. So that's something we'll look at, but I would say 99%, because you never say 100, that I'm not for raising any kind of taxes.
Okay, Gabe, do you want to talk about the overall budget deficit? Are you willing to cut programs, or are you willing to increase taxes?
Well, so going back to what I said earlier, Maryland's the richest state in the union per capita. And we also happen to have a very regressive tax code. That's not according to me. That's just what it is. And there are a number of ways that we can certainly find revenue. There may not be an appetite to look at our state's tax code, but at some point we're going to have to look at figuring out how those who can and should be paying more are paying their fair share, so that we're able to fund these things. I always remind people of a quote by a conservative, not a liberal, not a Democrat, but a conservative, that said, taxes are what we pay for a civilized society. And I just don't know how we're going to get some of these services, especially as population grows, as community needs grow. I don't know how we can expect these very good and efficient services if we aren't willing to pay taxes or look at our state's tax code. And I think that's where we need to get to. And hopefully we get there over the next 4-8 years while Governor Moore is in the executive branch. but that's just something that we need to. But what I will make very clear as a member of the Appropriations Committee that I don't support is austerity. And that's not something that I believe helps our economy. It helps communities. But it just so happens to be something that Republicans and some Democrats tend to turn to whenever we start talking about budget deficits. And austerity is one of those things that just won't help our communities, our economy. But what we should be doing is looking at how we can pay for some of these services by finding innovative ways to pay for them. But lastly, I'll say this, that while we do have to look at our state's tax code, my priority in terms of funding is ensuring that we're funding the work of the Kerwin Commission and everything that we committed to as far as our public school system. We have not completely fully funded Kerwin, and I think that's important to point out. There's still some work that we need to do for future years. And I would say that's a priority for us. I think it's worth looking at our tax code and revisiting it and making some reforms for our education system. So we're back at #1 in terms of our public schools. But outside of that, I would agree. I don't think there's much appetite for our tax code, changing it for anything, outside of that.
Nancy, you already answered part of it. Do you want to say anything else? Programs to cut, taxes to raise?
Well, I don't know about programs to cut. That's a touchy one, but I don't see any taxes being raised. I agree with Gabe about the blueprint. That has to be funded this year, and there are some outlying counties. On the Eastern Shore and over in Western Maryland, there are like 6 counties that do not want to participate in the blueprint, and everyone has to participate. We have to make it work for the whole state. There are like I think a lot of it is the Republican counties that just don't want to. They really just don't want to spend the money. So they're working really hard to not participate in Kerwin, but we may have to do a little bit of tweaking, and it'll be very minor tweaking, in order to make it a little easier for everybody to participate. But I don't see us changing it much.
Okay. Lesley, do you want to talk about cutting programs, raising taxes?
Sure. Like I said, as someone who is not a member of the money committees, I wait to see what the governor's budget looks like, and then respond to that, because that there's been a lot of work that's actually been to study these issues, and they're not like knee-jerk reactions. And for me at this part of session, I don't want to introduce rumors of what might get cut and what might be raised. For me as a policy committee member, the challenge is, how do we achieve the things that we need to achieve, knowing that it has to have a very low fiscal note? And so that comes, you just have to be creative how you come up with policy changes that are enforceable and real and viable and significant, but aren't going to cost the state money. And so that means working with partners across sectors, the private sector, the public sector, people and nonprofits, to figure out how to make all these ends meet. And so I know this is going to be a really challenging session. It's unlike any session that I've gone through, this being my 6th session. And so I look forward to learning a lot about the process. And, I have a lot of faith in my colleagues that are on the money committees that they'll do the right thing.
Okay, thank you, Lesley. Okay, the next question. What actions will the General Assembly take to address the housing crisis in Maryland? Nancy, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I'm not sure. There's a lot of discussion, but I've not really seen any concrete kind of ideas that can help. With the budget being tight, I don't see a lot of funding going out to the counties to help with that. So no, I don't have a good answer. Hopefully within the next 90 days we will.
Okay. Lesley, would you like to address the issue, the housing crisis in Maryland?
Sure. So what I have heard, and this isn't a rumor, this is a real thing. I have heard that the governor is working with lawmakers to introduce a package of bills and concepts to help address affordable housing. And so we haven't seen that yet, but I know it's going to be one of the governor's priorities. I know Delegate Von Stewart has been a part of these efforts. And you know, he has my respect, and I look forward to seeing what the specific details are.
Okay, Greg, do you want to talk about the housing crisis?
Just repeat what I said earlier. One of my key issues is housing, but as it relates to seniors. So I'll be looking forward to working with my committee members and others to see what we can do, not only just for seniors, but housing as a whole in the county, in the state. But I think maybe, and again, new, but I believe maybe there could be some tax incentives, something like that could maybe help some of the developers to build more affordable housing. So there's something we'll look at. But I repeat, senior housing is probably one of my most important things that I want to work on.
Okay, Gabe, would you like to comment?
I'll say quickly that I'll wait to see what bills related to housing is introduced this legislative session. But I will make a plug for one bill related to housing that I'm working on. We'll be introducing along with Renters Alliance of Montgomery County. We want to ensure that as we're having a conversation about housing and affordable housing, that there are greater tenant protections or protections in the law for renters. And so I'll be introducing a bill that would create the Office of the Tenant Advocate, which is a statewide bill that ensures that we're not just working with tenants and renters across the state in knowing what their rights are, but also serving as a mediator, whether it's between landlord and tenants, providing representation, all of those things. I think the pandemic sort of showed that renters in our state not only have very little rights, but we need to ensure that we're protecting renters from predatory landlords and practices. And so I'll be introducing a bill that creates the Office of the Tenant Advocate. And so happy to talk to folks about that, but we'll wait and see as far as any housing bills, what I'll be supporting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question. What action will the General Assembly take to address the affordable childcare crisis in Maryland? Lesley, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So I am on the Women's Caucus Affordable, it's called Childcare for All, Universal Childcare Zone, we call them Childcare for All committee. And so I know that there's a number of bills that we'll be introducing. I think looking at some of the federal models that are out there on capping the expenses, like right now the conversation is that like no more than 7% of your income can go to childcare expenses, and like there's a way to work on that. I think that's a pretty slim number. I will tell you that 100% of my income as a state lawmaker goes to childcare expenses just down the street in Germantown. And so I know that's an ambitious goal. Personally, I think, every industrialized country in the world has come up with a way to solve this, and so the solutions are there. It's the one issue that seems like it brings together labor and the private sector, because labor unions, particularly in the building trades, know that they're having a hard time recruiting women for really good jobs because they can't find childcare. In the private sector, you have folks who want to bring back their employees to work or recruit folks to work, but there's just not opening spots in childcare. And so I think, it's really a fertile ground for improvement. You need to, if we're going to keep it in this market-based system, we need to figure out ways to pay childcare workers more, so it's a more competitive position, and there's incentives for more usually women to start these small businesses and create the supply that's there. So, I think there's a lot of work, and I'm excited to keep working on it. To give a shout out, Senator King introduced a bill last year that I know she'd been working on for quite some time with Delegate Jared Solomon. It changed the formula for scholarships for the lowest income folks to expand it a little bit more. And so I want to, create space for really the person who's been leading on it, Senator King, to talk about it. Sorry to take over your job, Charlie, but.
Okay, thank you. Nancy, I'll go to you because I know you've done some work in this area.
Well, this has been an issue of mine for a lot of years, because if we want to improve our economy, we have to get people back to work, and they have to be able to have their children taken care of so that they can go back to work. The problem that we're having right now, if it's about $200 million a year, and we are out of money. We've had people that are applying. They get into a child care center, they apply for the funding, and it takes them a couple months to find out that they are not approved for the funding, and then they end up being in a bad position of having to repay for the child care that they couldn't afford in the first place. So we're trying to find some different ways to get things funded. MSDE is really, they're kind of desperately trying to find some funding for that, just because we're out of money, and we know has got to be a huge priority. So we're working on solving that problem.
Okay. Greg, do you want to say anything?
Just
That's
add
all.
that I will support Senator King on that. And I am on the Ways and Means, which has that with the education. And the one thing they want to make sure that we continue to fund statewide, the K through 12. But when money is available, and I know it's not now, maybe in the pre-K, because in the center that I'm currently working at, they have these 3-year-olds that are there, in the Montgomery County government, and the MCPS paying most of it. So I'll be working closely with Senator King and doing everything I can in my committee to bring about what I call, make sure that all our kids K through 12 at least can go to school. And that'll help somewhat for those parents who have kids that are 3 or 4 years old and up.
Okay. Gabe, do you want to talk about affordable child care in Maryland?
I feel like everyone covered it, but look forward to supporting good bills that really help working families address the issue of affordable childcare. And I'll go so far as to say, not just working families, but also something that we're hearing a lot of, but childcare on college and university campuses across the United States, and the kind of barriers that presents. So I think everyone sort of spoke to that, and I look forward to supporting just good bills that really help working families on childcare.
Okay, thank you. Nancy, I'm going to start with you in the next question because you've done a lot of work in this area. Maryland approved the education blueprint that will need to add $3.2 billion over 10 years into the education budget. Should there be any changes to this plan? I know people are talking about it. What do you think?
Well, I think there may be, like I said earlier, a little bit of tweaking, but I don't see any major changes to this plan. If we change it, there was a lot of thought and effort put into this plan by a lot of people, educators included, and to start taking it apart now, I think would be hugely detrimental to the program. Like I said, I think there may be a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done. And one of the arguments I hear is, like, if you start a teacher at $60,000 over in Garrett County, that person would be making probably more money than anybody else in the county, because the economy's bad up there, and it's slow, and people don't make that much money. So there may have to be some kind of tweakings there, but I think everybody has to participate, and we've got to take the most of that whole plan in order to help our kids succeed.
Okay, Greg, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I would just say on that one, because we don't have to repeat ourselves, I agree with the senator on that one. And again, on Ways and Means, that actually will be there. In my first month of after being appointed to the General Assembly, we met with the Secretary of Education for the state, and we met with a couple of the unions whose names I don't know now, but represent the teachers. But we did talk about the blueprint, and as the senator said, we might have to tweak it a little, but I'm 100% in doing everything we can to achieve the goals of the blueprint that many years ago, when I was dealing with the NAACP at that time, we were supporting that blueprint. So that's what we would say. Thank you.
Okay, Lesley, do you want to add anything?
Sure. I mean, I think anytime you pass a big behemoth of a bill, or in this case, really like a package of bills, like with the blueprint, there's always going to be tweaks that come from that. And so I think that can be expected. But when it comes to a major overhaul or change, so much work came, was put into coming up with really an overhaul that's like structural and programmatic and system, like all of the changing those systems. Everything is supposed to be working in coordination with each other. And so if you take one part out, that it doesn't, the essence goes away. And so just to underline everything that's been said, I don't see big changes, but some tweaks.
Okay, Gabe, you want to talk about the education plan? Do you think we should tweak it, or is it okay?
I think everything that needs to be mentioned has been mentioned. And as I said earlier, my priority is to ensure that we're fully funding Kerwin, which we have not done as yet. So I agree there's a lot of other priorities, and we deal with this as members of budget committees. You got a lot of folks coming with priorities from transportation to healthcare to housing, et cetera. And my hope is that we continue to be committed to Kerwin and fully funding it through and through, so that we don't have what we had with the Thornton Commission, which was a lot of work that was done, a lot of verbal commitment, but then no dollars, no state funds and resources to back that up. And so I think the success of Kerwin is based on us funding that. And that's pretty much where my priority is fully funding Kerwin and everything that we committed to in passing the blueprint.
Okay, thank you all very much. Okay, we got one more question, and then we'll give you a chance to wrap up. But I also want to thank two council members for joining us. Councilmember Don Lukey is with us. Councilmember Marilyn Balcom is with us. I'm glad you two could join us. And Councilmember Sales sent Jennifer from her office to join us. We also have a lot of Central Committee members. I know I'm going to miss some, so I'm not going to try to name them, but we appreciate you all being with us for this evening. Okay, the last question. Lesley, I'm going to go with you first. How do we keep Congressional District 6 blue in 2024?
If you tell me to be short, Charlie, I got a lot to say on this. I think, the quickest way for me to answer that is to say we have to elect someone in the Democratic primary who's gonna be consistent with Democratic values to make sure that the base turns out, but also is able to bring in independence. And I've looked at the numbers in the map probably more than anybody else that you're going to meet today. And I will tell you that if we get the Democratic turnout to be what we can estimate it to be, and get about 15% of those independent voters, we will secure this district. The really encouraging news about all of this is that Frederick is growing in this tremendous way when it comes to new Democrats moving in. Up until about 2 months ago, every month between like 100 and 150 new Democrats were registered to vote. And these were people who are moving to Frederick because there is affordable housing. And some of them are consistent Democrats and some of them are new voters. But, the numbers there are going in a positive trajectory. And so if we can make it through this next cycle, I think we'll see a bluer shade of purple. I think, when it comes to being a Democrat running in an area like this, you either take the Manchin approach, which is to be right down the middle, and you're going to lose some Democrats, but hopefully you pick up some Republicans. Or you take like an Andy Beshear approach, who's the guy who just won re-election to be governor of Kentucky, which is stay true to your Democratic values so your base turns out, and then do it in a way where you're bringing people into the fold who are independents, who are so turned off by how polarized and how extreme the Republican Party has been. And so that is my approach. A fun fact about this legislative district: it's 29% of the voters who live in District 39 are independent, and for the whole Congressional 6, it's 21%. And so technically, people who have run and been successful in this district are used to talking to independents at a higher rate than what you might think. And so I won't make my full pitch, but you can, of course, check me out at lopezformaryland.com or follow up.
Okay, Nancy, what can you do to keep CD6 blue?
Well, I think it's up to all of us to urge people in that district to get out and vote and vote Democratic. It's we've all got work to do in order to make that happen. It's absolutely doable.
Okay, Greg, what do you think?
And I would add to that, first agree both, but when several years ago, when I was a volunteer at the Democratic Central Committee, we worked very closely with our students, high school and college, to actually register people to vote, number one, and two, to get them to come out. And we were very successful when President Obama ran his first time for president. So I would say that what the delegates in the Senate has said, but also to get our young people register, but get them to help volunteer and knock on doors, because the more Democrats we have, then we have to, of course, get them out to vote.
Okay, Gabe, do you want to respond?
Well, I think it's I mean there's no magic or new formula in my opinion. I think from my observation, it's a working class district, and Democrats has and continues to be, in my opinion, the party of the working class. Even though we may not necessarily speak always the language of the working class or pass policies that represent working class folks, but I think that's where we need to get back to. Working class folks do better under Democrats. And I think we need to ensure that we're speaking to the issues that matter to people, both in counties like Montgomery, Frederick, but also what we'd call Rust Belt counties that would be considered Republican, et cetera, because the economics, the pocketbook issues, all of those things matter to those folks as well. And I think it's about having a working class message that is inclusive as possible, and really takes into concern some of the things that we're hearing from Americans who, and I think it's also important to point out, the average American cannot afford a $500 or more unexpected bill. And so that really speaks to our working class, our middle class, and just how it's eroding. And so I would say things like whether it's, raising the minimum wage from the $7.25 at the federal level to a livable one. I think it's important to point out, as of 2024 January, Maryland's minimum wage is $15 an hour. It went up. We passed that bill in 2019, but the federal government hasn't really been able to keep up. So the federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. I think we need to do something about student debt, which is a huge problem. And then lastly, I think we need to do something about rising student or college debt.
Okay, I want to thank you all for your answers. I'll throw in a little plug here. We do need precinct leaders in a lot of the precincts here in CD6. So if you're willing to be a precinct leader and help us get other Democrats to register to vote and to come out to vote, we really could use your help. Okay, I wish we had time for a lot more questions. If you go to the chat room, you can see there's some other questions that were asked, but we don't have time tonight. So I'm going to ask each member of our delegation to just give us a short closing statement. And Senator King, I'll start with you.
Senator King, before you jump in, Charlie, Andrew, Sandra, and I talked about the questions in the chat, kind of offline. What we can do is email those questions to the delegation, and so that they can be answered. So, Andrew, am I correct in that? Yep. Okay, he's saying thumbs up. Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Milman. Okay, Nancy, you want to give us a few closing comments?
Sure. I think I heard Lesley say this is going to be an interesting session. Well, I've just started my 21st legislative session, and each one of them has been different. Each one has a different personality, and each one has a different dynamic. So I find them all totally interesting. In the past couple of years, we had COVID money. We had lots of money to spend, and it was really kind of fun to hand out $1 million here and $1 million there. Well, those days are gone, and there is no COVID funding. That's gone. So I think from all the leadership conversations that we've had, it's not a critical, terrible year, but it's a year where we are going to try and make do with what we have. There may be some people that don't get the funding that they would love to have. But I think it's going to be a decent year, and our chairman, Guy Gazzoni, is pretty much saying the same thing. He doesn't see taxes being raised, and people, like I said, will not be happy because they don't have the kind of funding that they've had in the past. For me, it's been the busiest December that I think I've ever had, because everyone in the world is wanting to meet with us to make sure their funding is there, which we just can't promise at this point. So, but we've been busy with people wanting to meet with us before session, during session, after session, whenever it is, to try and get their funding. So it's going to be a really interesting 90 days, I'll tell you.
Okay, Lesley, would you like to do some closing comments?
Sure. I think that to Nancy's point, every session is challenging, and this one has, considerable challenges because it's a new environment, but you elected us to rise to that challenge. And so I think we're all ready to go and excited about the next 90 days. And I just took a quick glance of all those questions in the chat. And so I'm really excited that we have this much engagement. Don't anyone ever tell you that Up County is not engaged on issues. And I hope this is, just an ongoing conversation with folks to get things going. We're here to be of service to you. And so I know we can distribute all of our emails to keep those conversations going. So I'm just happy we had the turnout we had.
Okay, thank you, Lesley. Gabe, would you like to do some closing comments?
I just want to thank everyone again for joining this evening. It is good to see familiar as well as new faces. Happy New Year. Certainly looking forward to this legislative session. As I've looked at all legislative sessions, because it's really an opportunity for us to do some good and to do some good for you all and folks across our state. Please continue to stay in touch with my office. I want to hear from you, whether it's on bill ideas or on constituent services. Our first job is really not introducing bills and getting bills passed. At least in my opinion, it's really the job of constituent services. And so if my office can be of help, feel free to reach out. We are here to help as much as possible, and looking forward to just passing a really strong Democratic agenda now that we have a Democratic House, State Senate, and Governor's Mansion, so that we could do some really good stuff for working people. Happy New Year, everyone. It is good to see all of you all. And please continue to stay involved and engaged, because it really does matter. And as we come into this new session, we're going to be dealing with a lot of issues. I've heard from you all leading up to the session on a number of stuff, from education to transportation to housing to even the conflict that we are seeing right now taking place in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, and the kind of refugee crisis that's creating. I want folks to know that I've gotten your emails. I hear from you. I know a lot of our communities are hurting right now, and I think it's important for elected officials at every single level of government to be very clear in where they stand, which is where the American people stand, and that is calling for a ceasefire. I think 68 or 69% of Americans now support a ceasefire in Gaza, and about 70% disapprove of our President Biden, a Democrat's handling of this conflict. And so I just want you all to know that I hear you all. I know a lot of communities are experiencing Islamophobia, anti-Arab hate, as well as anti-Semitism and anti-Jew hate. And I think it's important for us as elected officials to make sure that we're tempering that by denouncing all forms of hate, but also calling for what a majority of Americans would like to see happen as far as this conflict. So thank you all so very much. Appreciate you all for being here tonight, and please stay in touch.
Okay, Greg, you get the final words here.
Yes, and thank you so much. I first want to say that I'm very excited to be going into this session. And I want to thank all of you for being on this call, and for those who have written me and talked with me. And I want to say, and Gabe said a little bit about it, that outside the senior housing, the other most important thing for me is constituent services. And I have a hero that was 20 years ago, and that was Chris Van Hollen before he became a senator. He was a congressman, and he was so good at constituent services. And I want to model our office here after him. And I want to say to everyone on this call, my door is open. Come and visit. And of course, if you have ideas about legislation or constituent services, I'm here to listen. So with that, thank you very much. And thank you, team, for putting this together tonight.
Okay, Moomin, would you like to say anything to wrap up?
No, I wanted to answer Diane Conway's question. Andrew, where's Andrew? I need help. How will the
Here.
questions in the chat be answered?
Yeah, so I will copy the chat is archived with the recording, and I'll send that along to you, Moomin, to send to the delegation after the meeting.
All right, got it.
Okay, delegation, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you in Annapolis. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, just quick question before everybody hops off. If you all don't mind, and no pressure, we have 2 council members on the line. If maybe you could take a minute, each one of you, and say hello to these wonderful residents who are here this evening, starting with Council Member Lutke.
Hey everyone, happy Thursday evening. Thanks for letting me lurk here on your D39 town hall. I'm super excited for the upcoming session. Geez, I got prematurely excited when I saw that the pre-filed bills were loading into the system today, but they're loading, but they're not actually there, so you can't click on them yet. So it was just a teaser. Don't go clicking till tomorrow, maybe by tomorrow it'll be better. I am very excited about all the things that my colleagues in the D39 team are doing this session. And there are a couple that are of serious interest to me, and thank you, Delegate Wims, for working so hard with our county attorney on the closing the loopholes. I did go visit with Sergeant Cap on Christmas Eve morning at Walter Reed, and you'll never meet a nicer person who's more motivated to get back to what they were doing. And he is presently fully engaged in physical therapy there at Walter Reed and will be there for a while. So thank you for that. And we go back to our regular Tuesday council sessions, full council sessions and committee hearings starting on Tuesday, January the 16th. And we do have a full complement of public hearings already scheduled for that day. And I will pass it over to my dear friend and colleague in the Up County, Councilmember Balcom.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm staying off camera. I'm in the car driving hands free. So everybody be okay with that. I just want to say that having Dawn on the council is so fabulous because of her state experience. And if there's ever anything that we're talking about that is somehow related to the state, Dawn keeps us all in check. So I appreciate that. And I just wanted to give a huge shout out to her. I think the blueprint is just so critical. I mean, we're in really dire straits here in Montgomery County in terms of education. But when we were at Mako this winter, as difficult an obstacle it is to fund Kerwin and Montgomery County, some of the counties around the state, it's an impossible task. So I know that from a state perspective, I know that our state legislators have a very difficult task in trying to find equitable funding for all jurisdictions. So I know that that's an issue. And in terms of something that I'm working on locally, is looking at the urban district for Germantown and what that looks like, getting additional services, and similar to the Olney area. So stay tuned on a local perspective about what getting additional county resources for Germantown and what that's going to mean. So, and just good luck to our legislators. I love you all, and anything that we can do, not only from the county's perspective, but as your constituents, please let us know.
And
Okay,
with that,
are we done?
Yeah, and with that, oh wait, I see a hand, Gabe.
Yes, thank you so much, Moomin. I see Paula. Thank you so much for your questions, and I know you've been typing away.
Paula Ross, yeah. Hi, Paula.
I know they're going to send all of these questions so that we can respond to them later. But I know you asked about public safety, and all of the issues are important. And if it's okay with the moderators, if you all want to, if we could take a couple minutes, I guess to say if folks are fine, because the meeting was scheduled to 8:30 and we're at 8:17, so I guess we have a little bit of time. But just talk about, because public safety, I think, is also going to be a part of the next legislative session. If that's okay, I don't want to.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to.
Yeah. We're hoping that we don't have to go all the way to 8:30, but that's okay.
Right. Fighting for you here, Paula. But look, as far as public safety, I think it's certainly a very serious issue. Public safety really is its umbrella term, right? Is a lot of things that fall under public safety, from school safety to safety in our communities, et cetera. And I just want to point out, because I know some folks have talked about MCPD and recruitment and retention. I have said and will continue to say that we need to ensure that we're paying our law enforcement officers more. And the reality of it is that what we pay, similar to teachers, because we had a conversation about how much we pay teachers, we don't pay enough. And so that puts us in a position of competing with other law enforcement agencies and elsewhere, not just in other counties or jurisdictions, but in other states as well. I think we also need to incentivize law enforcement officers that do live in Montgomery County or would like to live in Montgomery County. It's an increasingly expensive place to live in, and we got to find ways to be able to do that. And then we also need to be looking at state legislation as it relates to a number of these things. I know we're talking about, I know there's been some discussion about the Child Interrogation Protection Act by a number of police, including our own, and certain changes to that. I don't think I've seen any bill or proposal just yet, but I'm waiting to hear to see how they believe that we should amend that. But I want to be clear that when we talk about the Child Interrogation Protection Act, this in no way is about tying the hands of law enforcement, but about ensuring that whenever law enforcement interacts with juveniles or children or kids who are underage, that there's a certain process, there's protocol, and there are rights that are in place that are respected and upheld. And I think that's going to be our focus the next legislative session. And as far as public safety, I think a public safety concern is mass incarceration and the fact that we incarcerate more Black people aged 18 to 35 than any other state. And the way we address that is by ensuring that we're investing in the front end factors that will have an impact on crime and criminality on the back end. And I know a lot of folks have said that, but what that looks like, again, is housing, transportation, education, and economic development. So love to hear some more ideas from you and other constituents about public safety measures. But those are some of the things that, I've been keeping an eye on and will continue to.
Wow,
okay, I think Gabe covered a lot. Does anybody else want to say anything, or are we okay on public safety?
I know that Paula in her comments, and Paula knows that this is a topic that's near and dear to me. And I do know that there are several things coming in the juvenile justice arena to help clarify processes and make sure that things are being done in the right way, in the best way. Certainly, I think that some of the things that we all learned that through the series of inquiries that the House Judiciary Committee held this fall on that topic, led by Chair Delegate Luke Klippinger, is that there wasn't uniformity across all 24 jurisdictions in the state. And it depended on who was handling and how it was handling as to the processes. And technically there already was built into the Courts and Judicial Proceedings article a right to appeal if the Department of Juvenile Services did not move forward with referral onto prosecution, but nobody was really getting notified, right? It's little niddly things like that need to be cleaned up in order to make sure we are crossing the T's and dotting all the I's. And making sure that we are doing things at the time of the event when the referral is being made to juvenile services. Certainly that is a time when initial services should be discussed and talked about to aid the child, aid the family, etc., as opposed to waiting until there is a disposition, which may be 60 days later. Because that's a large amount of time. We would never, none of us as a parent would say something happened on September 1st and wait till November 1st to have a sit down conversation with the kid and say, what should we do about this? That's not productive, and it doesn't help in the developing brain. It doesn't help anybody learn, and it doesn't help you to know what the child might need in order to make better choices in the future in order to get off that path. So there's certainly a lot of work to do in that area. And that's just one small, tiny piece of our overall public safety landscape. But I do know that the administration is going to also be introducing some public safety legislation this session as well.
Thank you, council member.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Really
Well,
appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. It was really, this was a great session. We had a good turnout. One time when I looked at it, we had like 50 or so in the participants. So that's great. Let's do it again after the session ends. And so that is our next legislative town hall is, we haven't decided a date yet, but sometime in April or May. I see that Nancy's thinking. She hasn't
Okay.
decided.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
We'll see you
everyone.
next time.
Good night.
Thank you.
Take care. Be well.